Welcome into the Still Curtain podcast. I'm Josh Yourish, and it's 37 days until the Pittsburgh Steelers report to training camp in Latrobe. Not a lot of news right now, so today we're going to talk about one of the most important unfilled vacancies in the Steelers organization, and we're going to do it with a Pittsburgh legend himself. And then I'll tell you why the U.S. Open kind of gave me a bad feeling about the Steelers quarterback room. Trust me, it makes sense. And we'll break down the Steelers defensive front. But first, let's just get right into it with Lanny Frattare. After
Josh.
30 seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking for their next radio play-by-play announcer. Bill Hillgrove sat in that chair from 1994 through last season. And to talk about the candidates to replace Hillgrove, let's talk to a man who was a play-by-play announcer himself for over 3 decades for the Pittsburgh Pirates, the legend and the king of Western PA sports broadcasting, Lanny Frattare.
Josh, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks very much.
Of course. And I want to start right here with you. Pittsburgh has had some great announcers going all the way back to, Myron Cope, Jack Fleming, Bob Prince, then to your era with yourself, Mike Lang, and of course, Bill Hillgrove. What was it like to be a part of that fraternity in the city?
Well, I think it was most important to me that I was passed the baton. The torch was passed to me by Bob Prince. And I felt that there were a number of things that Bob had established. And also I felt it was more about what I believed was my responsibility relating to the great baseball announcers of the country: Vin Scully, Jack Buck, Harry Callis, Ernie Harwell, etc. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just a broadcaster. Bob Prince taught me that I had a responsibility to be more than just a voice on the air. And so he encouraged me to go out and meet with Pirate fans. He encouraged me to do appearances in the off season, to realize that I had a responsibility to my fans and to the fans of the Pirates. And so consequently, in my 33 years as a Pirate broadcaster, I averaged some 35 appearances a winter. I couldn't obviously make a lot of appearances during the season because whatever days off I had from the 1st of March to 1st of October, those days off, I had to be concerned about
those are precious.
My family and paying bills and mowing the lawn and things like, the regular deals that every person has to address. So it wasn't so much that I felt I was part of a current fraternity, or it was more that I believed I had an obligation to what had been created by the greats of our business. And by the way, let me say to you that I believe that the current generation of sportscasters, there are many of them that have strayed away from the foundations of what makes effective broadcasting, sports broadcasting, play-by-play broadcasting. And because I've been teaching in Waynesburg for 16 years, quite obviously, not only have I been mentoring the next generation of broadcasters, but I've also always been a student of what's going on in the business. And I'm disturbed that there's a lot going on in sports broadcasting, play-by-play broadcasting now, and even some other aspects of sport broadcasting that disturb me.
So one thing that I did in preparation for this, of course, was to go back and watch Jack Hillgrove's interview with Bill Hillgrove when he retired that the Steelers put out. And obviously, Jack was your student. He was one of the counselors when I went to your sports broadcasting camp. That was back in 2018. What were your initial thoughts? How proud were you when you saw Jack do that interview with his grandfather? Because it was just fantastic.
Well, I am proud, but again, remember, though I had a chance to spend time and discuss sports broadcasting with Jack, and he's been very gracious to me. And by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but Jack Hillgrove is a candidate for the new Channel 4 sports job. And I have no doubt that he would be, should be the number one candidate on that list. But remember also, I mean, in the 16 years I have been a professor at Waynesburg University, there have been, I would say 25 to 30 students that I believe understood what I was teaching them about what was important for them to be successful in broadcasting, and so to see them move on, and also to have them, check with me on a regular basis, and I call them on a regular basis. That means a great deal to me.
So when you're starting to teach Jack Hillgrove, and obviously that name pops up on your registration, and you would know him well before that, did you have conversations with Bill? How often did your paths cross? Did he, want to give his advice on the teaching? Because Jack talked about in that interview how when he was about 10, 11, 12, he realized he wanted to do what his grandfather did. How did your paths kind of intertwine?
Well, first of all, when I started the sports announcing camp for a number of the early years, I asked Bill Hillgrove to be one of the guest speakers, and so Bill knew of the camp, and so then when his grandson Jack was of the age to be at the camp, not only did Bill tell me that he was going to sign Jack up, but he also paid the $500 so Jack could come to the camp. So, but no, I take that back. He didn't pay the $500. What we did is we traded. I let Jack come to the camp for free, and Bill came to my camp as a guest speaker. So it was a
pretty good trade.
It was a wash there. So it was a great trade indeed.
So back in the day with Bill Hillgrove, is there a relationship?
Let me ask you a question. Where did we get that phrase "back in the day"? You know that? I mean, everybody says that, and everybody does. And I don't know where that started. But anyways, go ahead. What was your question?
Yeah. Well, I guess I could find a better way to phrase it. But I'm
just asking a question where it got started. I just hear everybody says it. Everybody says back in the day, and I never understood where that came from.
It was at least before my day.
Okay.
But where I guess I was going at the beginning with that fraternity of kind of you, Hillgrove, Lang, those names that are so synonymous with the particular team in Pittsburgh, did your paths kind of cross?
No.
What were those relationships like? They weren't
No. And I bet in the 50 years I've been in Pittsburgh, I've seen Mike Lang 4 times. Bill Hillgrove a little bit more because he came to my camp. I've been to some golf tournaments where he's been. I remember once we had a picture taken together. But no, and it wasn't, like I said before, it wasn't such a big deal. That what was more important to me was what was I doing to pay tribute to Bob Prince and Mel Allen and Vin Scully and Jack Buck and Harry Calloway. What was I doing to make sure, I had been given, the torch had been passed to me and been passed to people in my generation. Joe Castiglione is going into the Ford Frick wing of the Hall of Fame this year. And the reason it's even more, as I said earlier, the reason it's even more important to me now is because there are too many play-by-play and sports people that are just totally ignoring what has been passed on to them.
That's a good jumping off point for kind of this next discussion. You mentioned that pressure and that, you want to stand up to what they did, and you got the baton passed to you. Somebody's going to get the baton passed to them from Bill to take over the Steelers job. What were those feelings when you were first stepping into that role? And you still mention it now, obviously. What were those feelings back then?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that when I was a candidate for the Pirate job, I'm sitting up in Rochester, New York, in my hometown, and the only reason I had an idea as to what was going on was because Bob Prince called me a lot that winter, and he kind of informed me as to what was going on. And there were a number of people that I found out later in Pittsburgh believed that the only guy that could replace Bob Prince or should work with Milo Hamilton, because Milo had been hired, was somebody that was already in Pittsburgh. Greg Benedetti was a candidate for my job. Lang was a candidate for my job. I'm sure John Steigerwald was interested in my job. But what I was glad was that the Pirates didn't say, well, we got to have a local guy. If you didn't live in Pittsburgh, if you didn't grow up as a Pirates fan, you can't be a Pirate announcer. And that's absurd. Okay. I mean, the reason I feel that way is because, I grew up in Rochester, New York. Does that mean I only can become a broadcaster in my hometown? No, that's absurd. And part of the thing about the Hillgrove replacement is that, I know the candidates. I know the guys that are talking about the job. And I brought this up on the Fan one day. Tony Caridi, in my opinion, of the guys that are in this area, Tony Caridi's the best candidate. But Tony's already stated publicly that he doesn't believe that he can do it in light of the way college football is now these days and the scheduling and all of that. But I know Rob King's a candidate. I know Bob Papiani's name is being passed around. Josh Roundtree, who's a guy that I've worked with Trib Lime High School sports. But what I'm insisting on, what I'm saying is, let's not just automatically assume it has to be somebody from Pittsburgh, because I maintain that being a radio play-by-play announcer is unlike any other skill. And just because you've done football, television play-by-play, it doesn't automatically mean you can do radio play-by-play. The guy that replaces Bill Hillgrove should have done close to 100 to 150 radio football play-by-play games to be a solid candidate. The question is, those who could meet that demand, college voices of other college teams. By the way, the guy that does Ohio State football, and I don't remember his name right now, but I heard him do the Ohio State-Michigan game last year. He's fabulous. He is outstanding. But remember, and as a matter of fact, the problem with what's happening with radio play-by-play these days is that most radio play-by-play announcers are stuck with color analysts that believe that they should do the radio color analyst job like Tony Romo does it, like any color analyst, Troy Aikman, etc. And it's not that way. It is not supposed to be done that way. Because when you do radio play-by-play, at least 75% of what is being announced has to be from the play-by-play announcer. And so if the color analyst is not stepping away to allow the play-by-play announcer to do all that he needs to do, setting up the formation, giving the score time and period, location on the floor, describe it, like location on the field, the description of the play. I mean, those of us who are in play-by-play and have done radio play-by-play, we always use the term paint the picture. Well, if the play-by-play announcer doesn't get enough time to paint the picture, and I'm critical, by the way, of Craig Wolfley and to a certain extent Pat Bostic, because I don't think they understand that they must give their play-by-play partner more room. The other thing that really annoys me is the color analyst should never be talking over the play-by-play announcer's description of the play. And when color analysts are yelling and screaming, go, yeah, that is not their role. And I'll say this to you. If you go back and listen to the Marty Brennaman call when Pete Rose broke the all-time record set by Ty Cobb, if you go back and listen to that, you'll hear that you cannot understand what Marty Brennaman is saying because Joe Nuxall is screaming and hollering in the background. And so it's the same thing here. By the way, go back and watch Jim Nance's call.
I was just going to bring that up.
The Jim Nance's call of the championship call of Kansas City. Tony Romo ruined it.
Because he didn't get out of the way.
Because he couldn't shut up. He believed it was his moment, and it was not his moment. It was not his moment. And all the great calls, by the way, all the great calls that I believe I've had in my career, I've been fortunate that my color analyst stayed away and let me make the call. I make the call. I maybe add a note or two to my call. The crowd cheers. And then there's this period of about 30 seconds where the color guy has to shut up, to let the moment breathe, to let the moment happen, and then he comes into the equation. But I've heard Wolfley do it. I've heard Bostic do it. They are wrong to be jumping in and screaming and hollering when the play-by-play announcer is trying to paint the picture.
So you mentioned those names that you said on the Fan, those 5 guys who are the primary candidates. Are there any other names that you think should be considered? Any other people you think that are, excellent broadcasters outside of the region? Because it seems like it's going to be a regional pick.
I can't give the answer to that question because I heard the Ohio State guy, and I think his first name is Paul, if I recall correctly. I heard him. I've heard, again, remember that it's like saying that if you work at Eaton Park and you're a cook at Eaton Park, mm-hmm. you can now become a chef of a high class restaurant. Okay, you're now saying that because you're a family physician. Okay, you're a family physician. You can now do surgery. Okay, no, it's same thing. Just because you're a sportscaster doesn't mean that you can do play-by-play. And the reality is that unless you have done, and I know this because I lived it. The reason I became a legitimate candidate for the Pirate job is because in 1974 and in 1975, I spent 2 summers in Charleston, West Virginia, announcing baseball. And I worked a total of 250 baseball games in 2 years. And I know how I developed as a play-by-play announcer from my start of 74 to when I finished in 75. The other candidates for the job for the Pirates, Mike Lang had never done 250 baseball games to that point. Greg Benedetti had never done 250 baseball games to that point. Steigerwald may have come close because he was out in Wichita, etc. But for people to, and here's the thing. Here's the other thing. Okay, and I understand this. Okay, I know Rob King, and I think he's the best sportscaster in Pittsburgh. Okay, I think he's the best sportscaster in Pittsburgh. Okay, I know Bob Papiani. Okay, I know these guys, but just because I think they're good people doesn't make them the right candidate for a job, and that's the problem with the guys on the talk shows. Okay, because they like somebody. Okay, whether Starkey or Zeiss or Filipponi or any of these guys, offer up as a candidate somebody just because they think they're good people. Well, there's a lot of good people, but how about the good people that are qualified? That's my question.
Yeah. How about the good play-by-play broadcasters? So my parting question was going to be about where your passion comes from for teaching sports broadcasting, but it seems like that's been answered pretty well because obviously it comes through with those good best practices. And even in just a week with you, when I went to my camp back in 2018, I learned more about play-by-play than I did in my 4 years at school and calling games the entire time. So it's a fantastic experience talking to you and learning everything you have to say about play-by-play. So thank you so much.
Do we have a few more minutes or not?
Yeah, of course we do. We have as long as you want.
I am very passionate about it. Okay, but let me tell you this. Okay, one of the challenges I have now is trying to convince young people that are interested in sportscasting to get away from accepting just because they hear other announcers use phrases and terminology which have become acceptable, which are wrong. Okay, first of all, the word unbelievable. Okay?
I've never said unbelievable on a broadcast. That's something I was going to say.
It does not belong. It does not. It is not a word that covers what happens when Sidney Crosby makes a great play. It is not unbelievable. He's Sidney Crosby. Okay, when a guy makes a diving catch in the end zone, it is not unbelievable. Okay, it is 90-some degrees in Pittsburgh in June. It is not unbelievable. The other thing is, no one has explained to me what the word momentum means. I hear it all the time. Momentum, momentum, momentum. What does it mean? And why is it a part of the broadcast? And I'll tell you another one. You used it, okay? What's becoming part of, where did we get started with this quarterback room nonsense? Okay? There is not a quarterback room with special chairs and their own refrigerator. And there is not a quarterback room, okay? There's not a wide receiver room. Where did we get to this thing? Why is everybody, here's the thing. Here's my big complaint. Okay, it is fine to use the current terminology that sportscasters use. But the problem is that nobody's being creative. Everybody's using what everybody else says, and there's no creativity. And the other problem, and this is a major problem with young broadcasters today, and it's part of the Gus Johnson disease. It's a Gus Johnson disease, okay? Why are we screaming? You can get excitable, okay? But you don't want to lose voice quality. You don't want to talk so fast that your brain won't work. How many times have you, I heard it last night. What a goal. What a play. What a save. Wow. Aren't we smart enough? I mean, listen now, how many people are saying what a? Okay, Paul Steigerwald brought this up at the camp the other day. He's right about it. I heard it last night on one of the sporting events I was watching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what a. Are we not smart enough to be creative, to not let, just because it's part of, team chemistry, okay? I've been with 33 years of baseball teams. I don't know what that term means. What does team chemistry mean? You mean because we all sing Kumbaya, we're going to win? Right? Because
it's a good point.
Because Andrew McCutchen puts his arm around a rookie, he's not going to make this rookie player better than he is, right?
It's a good point, and it's probably a way of trying to explain the inexplicable in sports. If you're not in the room, if you're not doing the journalistic work, or
you mean
have somebody that is.
You mean there's a sportscaster's room now too?
Well, I'll find a more creative way to say that.
No, but the point is, we're talking about quarterbacks. Why do we have to put them in a room? Okay.
I think it's just the way. I don't know. It's a good point. It's something that bothers me in basketball when they say like score the ball or shoot the ball, or it's kind of a different way to say it, but it's not the ball.
Well, wait a minute. Here's my point. Here's my point. Well, okay. I tell my students when they do a football game, okay?
Yeah.
You can say take it to the house once.
Once. Okay. That's what you get?
You get one time. Every other time it's a touchdown. Is there anything wrong with calling a touchdown a touchdown? Well, he went downtown. Is there anything wrong with calling it a home run? Okay. It's in the red zone. Is there anything wrong with saying the ball's inside the 20-yard line? Is there anything wrong with just stating what something is? Why do we believe? And the thing is, we young broadcasters believe that they're being cutesy by doing this, when in essence they're showing they have no creativity, that they have no ability to come up. And by the way, I probably said this to you at the camp when you were there, and I said it to the campers this week. Is it listen to the way you talk to people? Keep in mind, cliches are the sign of a lazy broadcaster. Okay, I want to tell you something. I'm really proud of this too, by the way. I'm really proud of this. Okay. I've been a broadcaster for 50 years. 50 years. I have never said punch their ticket once. I have never said punch their ticket once. Is there anything wrong with saying they made the playoffs? Is there anything wrong that they've made it to the postseason? Why is that such a cutesy phrase, and why is it overused? I saw a headline today. Katie Ledecky has punched her ticket to Paris. Okay, tell me something else. She's made hotel reservations. Okay, she's made plane reservations. Okay, tell me something else besides and momentum. Gosh, dang it.
Well, we'll see who punches their ticket to the new Steelers radio booth this offseason whenever they finally make the announcement. I really appreciate it, Lanny. It was a lot of fun breaking down some broadcasting and talking about those candidates to be Bill Hillgrove's replacement, because they certainly have big shoes to fill.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Big shoes to fill.
There we go.
Cliche.
I got to put $1 in the cliche jar. Have a good one.
Thanks, Josh.
A lot of fun talking to Lanny Frattare. Fantastic stuff there. And we'll know soon. Like I said, 37 days until the Steelers report to training camp. We're going to know soon who's going to be the radio broadcaster. But it's a fun offseason topic to break down and see who those candidates are. Obviously, he gave us a couple of them with Tony Caridi, the West Virginia play-by-play broadcaster on the radio, Rob King, Bob Pompiani. Those seem to be the three favorites, even though Caridi seems like he may not be able to do it given the schedule of a Big 12 football slate announcing for West Virginia. We'll see how it goes, and we'll update you when we get word of who's taking over there. But for now, I got to talk to you about DraftKings. Hey, Steelers fans, DraftKings is offering a fantastic sign-up bonus for new users. New customers can place a $5 first bet on any sport to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets when you sign up with our code FSBETS. You will also receive one single game parlay reward every day. The best part is that you will get both rewards even if your first bet loses. Using our code FSBETS not only gets you these bonuses, but it also directly supports our podcast. If you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure to use the code FSBETS to maximize your first bets and to support the show. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check out the episode description for full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. And now we'll get to sports that are actually happening and what it made me think about in regards to the quarterback position with the Steelers, not the quarterback room, as Lanny would prefer that I say. We watched the U.S. Open yesterday on Father's Day. It was a fantastic event. Bryson DeChambeau came in with a 3-shot lead, dropped off. Rory McIlroy, a couple of early birdies. He took the lead, had a two-stroke lead going into the back nine and choked it away with a couple of short putts. And don't leave because we're not just talking golf right now. It gave me an uneasy feeling about the quarterback position for the Steelers. Now, it's not a perfect comparison because Bryson DeChambeau, the young guy, the newer version, the new age version, is the one who started with pole position, if you will. But if the Steelers quarterback battle looks anything like that battle did, and there are certainly some parallels, it's bad news for the Steelers, right? Rory McIlroy, this old legend of the game, trying to recapture his best years against a new age, younger guy with all the physical skills that Rory maybe doesn't have, right? That's Fields and Russ. Russ was the running quarterback. Rory was the guy who could hit the drives the furthest. And then everybody caught up. Now Wilson, not so fast. Not as big as the 6'4" Justin Fields, who's 240 and runs a 4.3 40. It's going to be that similar type of dynamic. The new age guy against the older guy trying to recapture his magic. And it didn't look pretty on Sunday. And from the reports coming out of mini camps, it hasn't looked too pretty for Justin Fields and Russell Wilson so far. There have been concerns about Justin Fields' accuracy. There's concerns about the lack of mobility with Russell Wilson. And even though he said he feels like he's found the fountain of youth here, we'll have to see that really play out. It gave me an uneasy feeling because I think that's what the Steelers season could look like. I think coming down the stretch, we saw Rory miss 2 3-footers. That could be what Russell Wilson does. He still has the deep ball. Rory still hits the driver well. But Wilson hasn't been accurate. He doesn't throw over the middle of the field. These things you need to do in modern offense to win games. And like Rory couldn't win the tournament. I have worries about Wilson's ability to really get the Steelers to the playoffs or make a huge impact when he does. Fields, on the other hand, he's got the big arm. He's got the legs, all the physical skills the way Bryson does. Bryson couldn't hit a fairway to save his life. Are those the types of issues we're going to see with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2024? I sure as hell hope not, because it wasn't pretty on Sunday at Pinehurst number 2. Hopefully it's a little bit more pretty at Acrisure Stadium on Sundays in the fall. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and you want Russell Wilson, you want Justin Fields, you want everybody to play well, and you want to hear us continue to talk about it, then support the podcast, support the Still Curtain podcast. Please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate your support. And that brings us to the last segment of the show. We want to get into the offseason roster doctor that we've been doing all summer long. It's been lots of fun. We finally reached the end. We've analyzed the quarterback position and the flexibility that they have there. We've looked at the malnourished group of skill players with very little investment financially or draft capital. We've looked at the beefed up offensive line that looks very strong heading into 2024. Last week, we talked about the secondary and the problems there, because there are some problems there outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick, but they're getting the secondary, at least from the reports, is starting to get realigned a little bit with Minkah Fitzpatrick playing further away from the line of scrimmage, doing what he does best as playing deep safety role, where he burst onto the scene once the Steelers traded for him back in 2019. They moved him way back in the defensive backfield, and he was a game changer as a ball hawk. He might be able to do a little bit more of that this year, because in the defensive front, we're looking at the D-line and the linebackers. The Steelers went out and added Patrick Queen this offseason. That's one of the biggest storylines for the defensive front. The other one, of course, Cam Hayward, talking about maybe finishing his career elsewhere, trying to use whatever leverage he can to get a new deal out of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's unclear if he'll be able to do that, but it's something that he's openly talking about on his podcast and in other places. So it's worth noting. Let's get into this group, because a lot of the Steelers star players are in the defensive front, and it all obviously starts with TJ Watt. Last year, a career high 86 pressures. He was 27th in the league with a 16.9% pass rush win rate per PFF. We all hate hearing about the pass rush win rate because he led the NFL in sacks with 20. Obviously, Myles Garrett of the Browns, the king of pass rush win rate, which the football nerds are falling in love with more. And I think there's some credence to it. TJ Watt was 41st in the NFL on true pass downs in pass rush win rate at just over 20%. It's a good number. And he converts a lot of those wins into sacks, which is ultimately the value of having a great pass rusher. As he reaches 30, maybe the dominance starts to slip a little bit. And that could really hurt the Steelers because they're heavily leveraged in their defensive front. The other star player up there, obviously, Cam Hayward. He's kind of the run defender now, at least at this point in his career at 35 years old. Last year was top 10 in run defense stop percentage. Another PFF stat, one that favors the Steelers this time. But that's just a way to contextualize the fact that Cam Hayward is a great run defender, still is, even with that core injury he was dealing with last season. He'll likely come back and continue to be a great run defender. The Steelers, though, they're paying a lot for a high-quality pass rush and a high-quality run defense because they're number 2 in the league in 2024 in linebacker cap hit at $63.2 million. Now, that's slightly inflated because Highsmith and Watt are both considered linebackers per Spotrac instead of defensive linemen. So some of the other edge rushers in the league, Max Crosby, these other high-paid players at the same position, they count as the defensive line. So it's a little bit misconstrued there, but still a ton of spending, $63.2 million. They're number 1 in 2025 in linebacker cap hit at $78.3 million, which is over $15 million more than the Green Bay Packers, who are second in linebacker spending. Watt will be paid $30 million, Highsmith $18 million, Patrick Queen $17.7, and Cole Holcomb, if he's still on the team, if he's healthy enough, $7.6. For Holcomb, that knee injury seems to be pretty bad. He's at a $7.6 million cap hit for 2024 and 2025. It's a $3.28 million dead cap in 24 and 1.6 in 25. So the Steelers can save about $6 million if they cut him after the season, which is probably what they're going to do. Unimportant. What's important is that they're heavily invested up front. That includes Watt, Highsmith, Hayward, and Queen. They have a lot of blue chip talents, great players up front, but they're paying for it. And these guys are aging. So it's not like they're exploiting some inefficiency with this. They're paying for the production that they get. So on the defensive line, they're number 9 in defensive line spending in 2024, and that drops to 28th in 2025 when Hayward comes off the books. So if they give him a new deal, that'll change, obviously. You can survive that type of cap situation with linebacker spending very high as long as the defensive line is cheap, but it's hard to have both. And it's hard to have both and have the 6th highest blitz rate in the NFL, which is what the Steelers had last year. And they were still only 11th in pressure rate and 11th in total sacks. So total sacks, again, somewhat can be misleading. There's a lot of opportunity goes into that, but pressure rate being 11th, that's not good enough considering what you've invested in draft capital and in contracts on these veteran defensive linemen. If you're going to spend that much, they should be able to get home without much help. You shouldn't need to blitz much. Last year, the 49ers were 5th and 10th in defensive line and linebacker cap hit. They were 30th in blitz rate. Now that's a difference in defensive styles, right? Steve Wilkes was kind of in that Robert Saleh branch. They're different defensive philosophies, but 4-down rushers, that's what they rush. The Steelers blitz a lot more. They still want to go to that 3-4 base every once in a while. Really, nickel is base for everyone in the NFL, but you get the point. There's financial investment and there's scheme investment when it comes to the NFL. And you need to have those two things in balance to have the best possible unit on one side of the ball. If you want to succeed as a high blitz rate team, which is what the Steelers do, then you want to spend your cap and your draft capital on lockdown cornerbacks. That's what New England's done for a long time under Bill Belichick. That's kind of what the Baltimore Ravens are doing right now. If you're going to blitz a lot, you shouldn't need the best edge rusher in the NFL to get home. What you do need is somebody who can survive in man coverage. The Steelers maybe have one of those in Joey Porter Jr., but the secondary is probably the biggest weakness on this team. So how can you be a high blitz rate team and have questions in the secondary and expect to be good enough on defense to carry an offense that's the cheapest in the NFL with 2 big question marks at quarterback? I'm not so sure how you can. If you look at the stat net yards gained per pass attempt, the Steelers were at 6.2 yards. That's 18th in the NFL, so right about league average. That factors in passing yardage, the opponent's passing yardage, minus sack yardage. So that's where sacks show up. That's where TJ Watt's 20 sacks are more valuable than pass rush win rate in that stat. And yet, the Ravens and the Browns were number 1 and number 2. They showed 2 different ways to slow down an opposing passing game, which is the name of the game in the NFL when you're trying to construct a defense. And it's relevant because they're the AFC North rivals, along with Joe Burrow and Cincinnati, that the Steelers need to beat to get into the playoffs. So the Ravens get pressure, much like I mentioned with New England. They have a rotating cast of edge rushers. They were 11th in linebacker spending and 28th in defensive line spending. The 11th in linebacker spending, primarily Roquan Smith. So that's not edge rushers. They let Matthew Judon go. Actually, New England's the one that picked him up. That, kind of straying from their philosophy there. But they invest heavily in the secondary with players like Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, and recently with Mike McDonald, who's now in Seattle. But this Mike McDonald defensive scheme, they use a lot of simulated pressures to confuse opposing quarterbacks on who's blitzing, but they don't blitz a ton. It's a difference in scheme investment and financial investment. They're number 4 in secondary cap hit in 2023, because we'll look at last year's numbers for their blitz rate and everything. They were middle of the pack in terms of blitz rate. They're investing heavily in the scheme up front with their simulated pressures and bring a lot of people to the line of scrimmage. That's what the Mike McDonald system does rather. Brings a lot of defenders to the line of scrimmage. The quarterback doesn't know who's coming. Some people drop out, so it's not always a blitz, but that's an investment in your scheme. They didn't invest financially to get pressure. The Browns, on the other hand, they invested a lot of capital in the number one pick, Myles Garrett, and they're paying him. Zadarius Smith, they brought him in last offseason to play opposite. Jim Schwartz is running that defense now, and he does some different things, but it's still a scheme investment with more of the financial and draft capital investment on the back end. That defense is a little bit cheaper because they have to find a way to work around the albatross that is the Deshaun Watson contract that's going to be on their books for a while. But it's heavy draft capital investment in secondary players like Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, both first-round picks. It's paying Myles Garrett and then making the most of Myles Garrett, not just sticking him on the edge all game long and saying, okay, you're going to beat the right tackle. They know that their right tackle needs help. Like anyone who plays the Steelers knows that TJ Watt's going to be out there, and they can find ways to help him in their scheme because the Steelers aren't doing anything creative to get pressure up front. They're just bringing more people, which leaves your secondary exposed. The Browns do it differently. They, in true passing downs, often bring 3 pass rushers onto the defensive line, Garrett, Smith, and Okoronkwo, instead of having beefier defensive linemen who aren't going to get after the quarterback as much. And they move Myles Garrett all over the place on the defensive line. They find the best matchup for him so he can avoid double teams and cause chaos, really, for the quarterback and the opposing offensive line, because they don't know where one of the best defensive players in the NFL is going to be every down. So this is scheme investment and financial investment and bringing that into balance, and it doesn't feel like the Steelers have done that. Pittsburgh has plenty of talent on the defensive line. Watt and Highsmith could be the best duo in the entire NFL. The best edge rushing duo in the NFL could be TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. They're starting to age. They're getting near their 30s. Watt's already there. So the inefficiency to exploit is not to blitz a ton. It's to drop and help your secondary that doesn't have a ton of talent, dropping 8, dropping 7, only rushing 3 or 4, letting your talent that you're paying for up front win, and then you get the reward of actually paying those guys. But if you're going to be 6th in blitz rate, you're kind of losing out on that surplus value of having an elite player like TJ Watt, like Alex Highsmith, like Cam Hayward. They haven't really shown a willingness to do that. And one of the reasons might be, and this might be why they paid so much for Patrick Queen, they've struggled to stop the run recently. Cam Hayward's good against the run. Montravius Adams gets pushed off the spot quite a bit at the nose when he comes in rundowns. They haven't really found a good tandem. Larry Ogunjobi, they overpaid him because they're desperate to retain talent on the defensive line next to Hayward. And that contract doesn't look very pretty because they have to continue to invest to try to stop the run. And they're investing in their scheme, blitzing. Maybe Patrick Queen fixes that. Maybe he's a good enough inside linebacker that if you're only rushing 4, you're dropping a lot and they try to run, Queen will make the tackle. You can keep Minka away from the line of scrimmage. You can do more creative things in the secondary. That's the hope. If not, the Steelers will have a good defense, but the lack of scheme flexibility, the lack of balance in terms of scheme investment and financial investment will hold them back from being great. And if you don't have a great defense with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, I don't think you can win a playoff game. I don't even know if you can make the playoffs. And that's why there are some worries for me about the Steelers' defensive front. It's going to be a good unit. Is it going to be good enough to justify the amount that they're paying it? that remains to be seen. And ultimately, that responsibility, while somewhat to Terrell Austin, falls on the shoulders of Mike Tomlin, who just earned a 3-year contract extension. So he better be up to the task of making this defense great, or else we'll be mired in, I say we, the Steelers will be mired in mediocrity for the next 3 years until Hayward's gone, Watt's even older, and you got to do it all over again. So the window for this defense to be great is right now. And they need to be a bit more creative with their scheme to really maximize all the talent up front. That's going to do it for the show today. A big thank you again to Lanny Frattare. He was excellent talking everything sports broadcasting. That's a passion of mine, something I love talking about. I love calling games. I've loved learning from Lanny for years. He mentioned those candidates to take over for Bill Hillgrove. Doesn't look like anyone's truly emerged as the favorite. And Lanny thinks that maybe the Steelers should look outside the Western PA region. I can't imagine they're going to do that, but maybe. And we'll see. We'll keep you updated on that story. And thanks for humoring me with my U.S. Open analogy. That's fun to talk about some sports that are actually happening. Again, 37 days from the Steelers reporting to training camp in Latrobe, and we'll be with you the entire way, the entire offseason. Thanks again. I'm Josh Yourish, and this was the Still Curtain Podcast.